What is up, Internet? This is the latest episode of the Fitness Reborn podcast. My name is Sean from Renaissance Fitness Personal Training, where we put movement ahead of workouts. And my guest today is Aaron Woolf. Aaron is a martial artist, a teacher, weightlifter, the owner of Atlas Menswear, and of course, a husband and a father. Aaron, thanks for coming on, man.
Glad to be here. Excited to talk to you.
Yeah. So, like I said, before we started recording here, Aaron's got a pretty neat background here. He's very accomplished and more than just one way, too. So, like I said already, he owns, in addition to being very athletic and having a family, he owns a clothing company, which is pretty cool in itself. And we're going to get into that a bit later as it naturally weaves into Aaron and everything he is and everything he does. But yeah, let's just kind of, before we go into the clothing brand and everything, let's just kind of dive into it right away here. So, like I said already, you're pretty accomplished here, and you're a deep believer in athletics and being physically fit, obviously, hence you're here. But talk about how that kind of all forms you as a person here. I guess let's kind of start from the beginning. Like, what was your upbringing like?
Sure. I'll go a little bit into my my professional background, and then we'll go into a little bit more of the athletics. And just kind of a nutshell, high level. Was in the military. It was my first real job. I worked on some small part-time jobs before that. Went in the Air Force. When I got out of the Air Force, I had a couple different jobs in finance, and then I got a job at a pretty large corporation, kind of worked my way up there into the management positions. But in all those positions, I was never really happy. I didn't like working for somebody else. I knew I had an entrepreneurial spirit, but I was just kind of paying the bills pretty much and selling chunks of my life at an hour at a time to somebody else. And I really wasn't happy with that. It really didn't like making somebody else rich. So in 2014 is when I just walked out of my corporate job. I called my wife and I said, I can't do this another day. It's just not me. And I can't continue to do it. And I'm quitting today. And she kind of laughed. And it could be because she thought I was kidding, because we have 4 daughters too. So that decision wasn't just affecting me. There was a lot of people dependent on me for food and a lot of mouths to feed. But I wasn't kidding, and I came home and kind of went into the first thing. I knew I had to keep paying the bills, so I went into construction, something I knew I could do right away. Started doing some small construction jobs. Got in with a local rental management company and was doing a lot of maintenance on their properties. That was my first jump into having a business of my own, but it really wasn't what I wanted to do long term. It wasn't in my long term goals. So then I'll kind of stop there for now, because that gets into my clothing company. But I'll backtrack and go back to the beginning again, when I was 6 years old, more on the athletic side. I started in martial arts when I was 6 years old. I started in Taekwondo. So at a very early age, I learned the value of exercise, of taking care of your body. Became very aware of how my body worked and what my physical limitations were and what I thought physical limitations were, and how to break through those things. So for most of my life, almost as long as I've been walking, I've been kicking or doing some kind of athletics and pushing myself physically. So it's very ingrained in who I am. When I got a little bit older, into my middle, late teens, I decided I wanted to compete very heavily in Taekwondo. And at that time, Taekwondo was the fastest growing martial art in the world. Is just right before UFC and mixed martial arts really started becoming big. They had announced that the 2000 Olympics was going to be the first Olympics that Taekwondo was an official full medal sport. It was in Olympics before that, but it was considered a demo sport. It wasn't an official Olympic sport yet, but 2000 was the first Olympics that was going to be an official sport. So that was my goal. I wanted to be in the 2000 Olympics. So I got really into competing. I actually got a job at the Taekwondo school that I trained at, so I could be there all day. So I was throughout the day. I was working in the office there. It was a pretty big school, I was helping with just office stuff. Didn't get paid much at all. I could have gone and worked at a grocery store and made more than what I was making at the Taekwondo school, but I knew that that's what I wanted to do, and my parents were pretty supportive and helping me. I was still not very old. I was young, so I basically did a little bit of work in the office and then just trained all day the rest of the day, and just completely immersed myself in Taekwondo, and didn't quite make it to the Olympics, but I did. I was in there with all the guys that did compete in the Olympics, and I knew most of them and competed against most of them. Um, so yeah, that's kind of my abridged Taekwondo story. And real quick, I wrestled in high school too,
Hmm.
which is I love wrestling. It's a very tough sport. Requires a lot of discipline and mental toughness to wrestle. And not only that, but making a weight class too, which I also had to do in Taekwondo. So I spent a lot of my younger years cutting weight. I had to stay. I'm 6 foot tall, and I had to in Taekwondo. I thought the cutoff for my weight class was 154 pounds. So not definitely skinny, but I was pretty thin. I was pretty skinny, and uh, so when I got done competing in Taekwondo, I thought, I've been trying to cut weight and stay thin all these years. Wonder what it's like to try to gain weight now and try to get bigger muscularly. So that's what I decided to do. I started going in the weight room and really hadn't lifted weights ever. And it was around my mid 20s, I just went to the weight room and started lifting weights and started figuring that out. And it turns out uh, it's pretty tough for me to put on weight. I'm one of
Oh
those
yeah.
guys that if I stop working out, I'll lose 15 pounds in a month. I
Oh,
mean, no
you're a,
no
you're
problem.
you're a hard gainer.
Hard gainer. Yep. The
Yeah.
ectomorph, I think is what the
Yeah.
term is. Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's tough for me to put on weight. I really need to be disciplined in my diet and my workouts and really watch that to try to gain. And it's very very incremental. Gains are measured in months and years, not weeks. That's for sure.
Hmm.
So yeah, that's kind of uh, pretty nutshell version of my
Sure.
background and where I come from.
What was it that you think was about Taekwondo? I mean, particularly combat sports, which wrestling is a combat sport.
Right.
Something. What is it about Taekwondo and combat sports and wrestling that you think just really you took a shine to? Because I know I did martial arts too as a kid. I think just about every kid, or at least you know when I was a kid, every boy at least a lot were going into something like that, either wrestling or taekwondo or something like that. It was very much encouraged. Particularly when I was very younger, I lived in a very different part of the country. I lived in Baltimore, and you know, extracurricular activities like that are offered as a way of keeping kids off the street, that kind of thing. So it's very encouraged. But anyway, it's a sport where a lot of people kind of drop out. Actually, I would say
Mhm.
probably at some point most of them drop out. Most of them don't entertain any idea about going to the Olympics at all.
Yeah.
So there was something about it that really kind of spoke to your personality.
Yeah. I guess the first thing that comes to my mind when you say that, what really drew me to
Hmm.
combat sports, and plus that it's being a mostly individual sport. You don't compete
Yeah.
with a team, even though you do have a team, but it's just you and the other guy on the mat. I am kind of a loner a little bit. I'm one of the people that I feel totally comfortable if I go out to dinner by myself. I don't feel weird at all doing that. Some people can't do that. Some people feel like
I
they're
know.
psycho if they're eating by themselves, and I am perfectly fine and content going out and doing something like that um, without anybody being with me.
Same. Same.
So I liked the accountability that
Hmm.
I had. If I go out on the mat, it's just me that I have to blame for for whatever goes good or bad, and I like that. It's not to say that I don't like being around people. I'm not that extreme. I get along with people generally, and but yeah, it's the individual nature of the sport that really really drew me to it.
Was that part of what your upbringing was like in general? Did your parents like really encourage like um, self sufficiency and self actualization as a part of like growing into becoming a functional productive adult? Was that kind of like where their parenting kind of came in at?
Yeah, when you say self-sufficiency, my dad really preached a lot about uh, being able to do things yourself. He said,
Yeah,
if you can do it yourself, why pay someone else to do it? And so
right,
I learned how to do a lot of things. I learned not just how to do things, but how to figure out how to do things. That was
right.
the main skill that you can figure out how to build a deck, but that's one thing. But if you can figure out how to build a deck, then that's something that can apply to many, many different things, not just that one particular discipline.
So okay, so you got really into martial arts. All right, you went to the or you got to the point where you didn't quite make it to the Olympics, but you got pretty close to it.
Right.
But you also went in college, you were very accomplished. Like in your bio, you said that you were multi-year a champion. It was in college, right?
Yeah. Well, not really in college. It's just it's not a collegiate sport. Well, they do have
Okay,
collegiate taekwondo, but I didn't compete in any college or anything. Just college age is when I was competing. But that's part of my story too. I did go to some college, but I didn't get a degree. I'm not good for a classroom setting either. I'm uh, maybe what you would call a little bit ADHD, and
yeah.
if I don't if it's monotonous at all, I just it's really difficult for me to do. So
Yeah.
yeah, that's
I,
my college story.
I understand that completely because my son is like that too. When he's into something, he is 100%. Like you
Yeah,
can't pry him away, for the end of the world. But if he don't care, he don't care. He is like, bye, dropping out. So
exactly.
I get
Yeah, yeah. The
it.
classes that I enjoyed, yeah, I wanted to go into the medical field. So any of the
Hmm.
sciences or anatomy and physiology, chemistry, organic chemistry, I got an A in college organic chemistry because I loved it. But if you English or anything that's not interesting to me, I just can't focus on it. I
Right.
have no patience for it at all.
So okay, so a long career in martial arts, and after that, after you stopped being competitive, you went into teaching it. You went into instructing.
Yeah.
Do you still instruct martial arts?
Um, no, I had a friend that I used to train with that had a school, and I would go there and help him. Recently help him teach, and my daughter was in it for a while, but he ended up having to close that school for a couple of different reasons. So right now, I'm not really teaching anybody. Always kind of thought about opening up my own school, but um, just never was never really in the cards. But I do enjoy teaching, and that's something that when you dedicate your life to something like that, and you're a student for so many years, and then you start get into your black belt, and then uh, uh, advancing beyond your black belt, and have
Hmm.
the experience of competing. It's something that just naturally you start doing. If you're in something like that, you just start teaching because you have the knowledge that you've gained with all that experience, and you see these young kids and even adults that are starting out, and you naturally start passing that information that you've learned onto those people, which helps them obviously, but it also, what I learned is when you start teaching somebody something, you really start to learn intimately what you're doing, because a lot of the things that you were taught were explained to you, and then you just kind of, if you've been doing something for that long, you just kind of start to intuitively know how to do it, and you don't really think about it anymore. How to throw a certain kick, or even
Right.
how to counter certain things. It's just ingrained in you, and you don't have to articulate it. But when you're explaining it to someone else, and you do have to bring those words out and the explanation, then different things start clicking in your head, and like, oh, that's why I do that. Or if you do have bad habits that you didn't realize when you're teaching somebody, those things come out too. And so teaching somebody really helps both the teacher and the student.
Right. Yeah, I've heard that before, and I've definitely experienced that before as a coach. It's called it's like the difference between unconsciously competent and consciously competent. You
Exactly.
know,
I love that. Yeah.
it's like, you do things like you've been doing it for so long. Now it's intuitive to you. It's just enmeshed into your DNA, and you just do it. And then, now you're teaching it to somebody. Now you have to break it down into words. You're going from like a languageless part of your brain to a part of the brain that has to have a language in order to teach it. So yeah, you're right. It's a very different. Psychological state to inhabit. You know,
Yeah.
and you do end up learning more about yourself and about what it is you're teaching.
Yeah. And I
But
also learned too that just because you know how to do something doesn't know you know how to teach that thing. So
no,
you can be
yeah,
good at
right,
something and not be a good teacher or instructor. That
right.
teaching is a separate discipline from knowing how to do it, and it takes a lot of, again, you when you start out teaching, you're learning how to teach then, and that's that's something else that you're learning and trying to perfect.
Yeah, you also learn that you'll learn just how much patience you have for in teaching somebody too. You have to learn to, if you want to continue teaching, you got to learn. You got to slow things down. You got to be patient with the person you're working with.
Yeah.
And I find a lot of times that is the hardest thing that people, especially very competent people, they just kind of assume that everyone is on their level. And when they realize they're not, they get pretty frustrated. And that's just kind of where things start to go wrong
Yeah.
because they don't learn how to rein in their frustration.
The thing that I learned that frustrates me the most is not that someone's not on the same skill level as me. It's that they're not
Right.
uh, the same. What's the word I want? Same level of passion towards it.
Mm,
Somebody, yeah, especially in Taekwondo, I dedicated my entire life to Taekwondo, and someone that just comes to a couple classes a week and doesn't really care about getting good or even becoming competent. That's the thing that frustrates me the most. I feel like um, not necessarily people have to dedicate their entire life to it, but if you're going to do something, do it well. You do put some effort into it
right.
and be dedicated to it. And if you're not dedicated to it, it's just not the right thing for you. Find something that you can be passionate about.
Exactly right. Okay, so we had the martial arts career. You transitioned into a teacher, but then you went a different direction altogether. You said you got into weightlifting when you were in your 20s, um, and so you became very advanced in that. You already showed a predilection for science, which bodes well for learning how to build muscle because that is a science as well as an art form. And so, talk about the transition from going in from like combat sports into weightlifting because that's kind of two different worlds you're going into. Combat sports, I mean, especially Taekwondo, they don't really put a huge emphasis on building muscle.
No.
I mean, if you do it long enough, especially if you get good enough, you will build a decent physique. It's unavoidable, especially if you show that level of dedication, you will get a decent physique. But that won't translate into becoming like a physique competitor or anything like that. So that's kind of like that's something very different like that. So you really kind of did an about face by going into a weightlift. So let's talk about that. What got you going in that direction?
Sure. Yeah. And when you say if you're doing a sport like Taekwondo, you're going to build a decent physique, you're right. But it also depends on what your definition of a decent physique is. Uh,
Right.
the way I competed, like I said, I had to stay in a weight class, so I couldn't gain weight. So I was very thin. A lot of people, that's their goal, is to be thin. I
Hmm.
never really liked myself thin like that. Just aesthetically speaking. Um,
Yeah.
so yeah, I was thin and I was in good shape, but I just didn't I wasn't happy just visually with the way I looked. So I knew when I was done competing that I wanted to kind of change that and put on some muscle. Um, and of course, as you know, if you're competing in Taekwondo, doing those type of workouts, you're not going to get bulky. That's not the type
Hmm.
of workout that you're doing. So it's a completely different mindset change to go from that to working out to try to build muscle and put on weight. Because when you build muscle, you're not going to be as quick. Even if you have a good amount of genetically fast switch muscle, if you put on more mass, it's just physics. If you're moving more weight around, you're just not going to be able to do it quite as quickly as you do if you're smaller and nimble.
Right.
So yeah, when I was very advanced and very knowledgeable in Taekwondo, and when I transitioned from Taekwondo to the weight room, I went down back to square one. I didn't know what I was doing. Um, I just kind of I didn't have a coach or anything. I just started lifting weights, and I started on the machines usually, and I learned a little bit from that because the machines kind of lock you into a certain form. Like a bench press machine. It's gonna more or less
Hmm.
put you where you want to be when you start doing free weights. So you kind of learn the different movements that way. And then I just started figuring out what worked for me, what didn't work for me. I would read some things and watch some YouTube videos and just gain knowledge from there, and realized what my goals were, and what I needed to do to accomplish those goals. So it was yeah, starting from square one again, and learning and figuring out what works.
Once you start seeing some success in that,
Well, you get the noob gains for
right.
the first month, 1, 2, 3 months. Even if you're not lifting right, you get those first 5 to 8 pounds of muscle gain, and you're like, wow, this is great. If I can
Hmm.
continue this, I'm going to be Mr. Olympia in a couple of years. And then you realize that once you get that, then it's very, very slow and incremental. And it's hard for me to put on weight, so I really had to learn the nutrition part of it, and that's probably what took the longest for me to learn. That I just have to, if I want to gain weight, I just have to pile in the food, and it's got to be the right food too. Chicken and rice, chicken and rice, chicken and rice, and a lot of it. Some red meat, some pork, but yeah, a lot of carbs and a lot of clean proteins is what I really have to do to put on weight. So um, yeah, just a lot of trial and error and learning.
Was that your learning curve about what you need to actually gain, will actually gain weight, gain the muscle here? Was that um, when you learned what type of, we talked a little bit, it's been mentioned a little bit about what type of body type you are. Like you're somebody who, like you said, if you stop working out, you're going to slim down.
Yeah.
And most of us are kind of the opposite. We stop working out, the the weight starts to pile on, and we get bigger. Um, when I wasn't very physically rigorous, I mean, I was more or less athletic off and on my entire life, but um, not anything like I am right now. You know, I never got huge, but I did get heavier. So I don't know where exactly that really puts me between an ectomorph and an endomorph. Um, I didn't balloon, but I didn't trim either. Uh,
Maybe it
but
was the
did
in
you
between
have
the mesomorph. Is
yeah
that
the
kind of a
the
combination of the
mesomorph?
two?
Yeah, the mesomorph, which is like the ideal, at least for guys, at least it's like the ideal. It's like you got the athletic build, I guess is what it's called. I don't know if I'm officially that or not, but did you have to? Was it? I guess the question I'm asking here is like, did you have to find out? Oh yeah, I'm actually this, and this food and nutrition makes sense for that because I'm more of an ectomorph as opposed to a mesomorph or an endomorph.
Yeah, when I first started working out, I thought I was going to just start putting on weight, and if I started eating more and lifting weights, I
Mm-hmm.
just thought the muscle was just going to start piling on, and that's how naive I was when I first started. So yeah, and it took over a few years of me trying different things and learning to figure out what body type I was and what I needed to do to work with that body type that I have. Um, yeah, and it's just, and honestly, I'm still learning. There's still things that I can tweak and do differently, and that I learned from somebody else that helps me. So it's a continuing thing.
When do you feel like if you ever got to this point, when do you feel like you actually, all right, I got it figured out here. I've I've got the formula figured out here, and now I'm seeing like gains consistently, not just like the initial, the newbie gains that you're going to get from going starting something, from doing nothing, you know, when do you feel like you actually got there? You actually had this thing figured out?
I don't think I'll ever have it be able to sit back and say I got it all figured out. But when I really hit a good stride, and really things started clicking, I was probably, I'd say about maybe like 10 years ago now is when I really started clicking, because I'll be 47 in about 2 weeks. So, this is, I started working out in my 20s. So it's been 20 years since I started really lifting weights and,
Right.
becoming dedicated at it. And there's been, fluctuations here and there where I've really pounded the weights for extended period of time. Then I'll kind of go do something else where I'll do maybe some more cardio and some things like that, and go back and forth. But yeah, I'd say about 10 years ago is when it really started clicking, and me figuring things out, and that I really figured out how I need to work out and eat to really make my body do what I want it to do. And that there's varying degrees of that too. If I really had 100% control over what I wanted my body to do, I'd be 50 pounds heavier. That's just not the body type that I have.
Hmm. So I just want to kind of dial in I want to dial in the timeline here. So you say you're just about 47 years old. You started this in your 20s.
Right.
You started to hit a stride 10 years ago. So when you're in your late 30s, that shows that is a huge amount of commitment right there. So what I'm trying to like put in focus here is like none of this came overnight.
Oh
It's
no.
like you started in your 20s. It was in your late 30s you start to actually feel like you actually got this dialed in at least a little bit, enough that you can actually see consistent progress. Because a lot of times when people go into a new fitness routine, whether or not they come from a fitness background or not, athletic background or not, like they did, they went from one thing to something completely different. They a lot of times expect to see, well, the results happen very quickly, like within a month, and if they don't see it even within a year, if it's not good. All right, let me stop for a second. They expect to see overnight results, and this is a lot what people out there promise too. So it's partly not their fault, with social media and everything. You have people out there promising great results within 3 months, and you know those of us who know better know better. That's really just a charlatan offer.
Yep.
And whatever results you do get in 3 months ain't going to stick around for 3 months, because the time that you have spent putting into this is going to greatly influence how permanent it really is, or how much it's really going to stick around.
Yeah. Uh, and a lot of those, you'll see results in 3 months are probably relying on what we referred to earlier as the newbie gains, which is a
Hmm.
phenomenon that if somebody, I don't know if we really explained that, if somebody that doesn't know what that is, when you first start working out, you're gonna see a jump within the first couple months of, um, but your body composition and your muscle mass. You'll gain some weight and you'll see some progress right away, and it's encouraging. It's very cool to see that, but it's not something that's gonna continue on like that. It's They call it newbie gains for a reason, because it's just a quick
Hmm.
jump. Anytime you change something in your life, you're gonna see a difference right away because your body adapts. But then
Right.
it takes a lot more uh, to continue that adaptation, and your body is going to level off, and it's going to be very slow. And like I always say, in the weight room, gains are measured in years, not months or weeks. So
That's good.
you have to know that up front and understand that. Otherwise, 6 months in, you're gonna get discouraged and say, "Oh, I thought it was gonna be way beyond what I am now." So yeah, you really have to be in it for the long game. And there's probably some things that I personally could have done to shorten some of that, the learning curve that I had if I'd have hired a coach, a personal trainer, or something like that. That is what you could call a shortcut, because I didn't know anything. And if I would have hired somebody that would have been able to teach me and show me what to do, just like a Taekwondo instructor, that probably would have shortened that learning curve quite a bit. But I didn't do that. I was tail end of my military time, and then moved back home and some things like that. So I was just figuring it out on my own.
All right, so we have the weightlifting. You got pretty advanced in that, and so let's go into now the more of the professional side of your story here. So Atlas Menswear,
Yeah.
which is part and parcel with you and everything that you're about. I did go over the website. I looked over the biography. I looked over the backstory. I looked over, of course, the products. uh, just by the description of the products here, I don't know if it's really for me. I'm probably just flattering myself. I think, "Ooh, these are good for me." Probably not, because I'm really just not that muscular.
But you don't have to be muscular, but you do have to be fit. So it's
right.
made for. Well, let me just kind of give you a high
Sure.
level what it's about. It's I'm never the biggest guy in the gym. I think we've kind of gone over that, but I do have broader shoulders, and my waist is narrow, so I have that V-shaped torso. So
Right.
I was always whenever I would go to the mall or any store to get a button-up shirt, a dress shirt, I was always really disappointed in how they fit, because the big clothing companies want to sell to the biggest possible market that they can,
Right.
which is either a straight down body type or even the dad bod and beyond. There's the number of guys in the general U.S. population that have that athletic V-shaped taper it's a small number when you're looking at the overall state of the American male, which is kind of a sad thing, but that's just the way it is. So those companies don't make shirts to fit the V-shaped torso. So when you go to the store and get a shirt, you have to buy it big enough for your shoulders. And then I would just see the shirt just hang straight off the shoulders and come down and just be really sloppy around the waist. So, and that defeats the purpose of working out and spending all that time getting that athletic physique or that silhouette. So I just started kind of asking around at the gym and asking guys, "Hey, do you wear dress shirts, and where do you get them?" And most of the guys would say either they don't wear them because they don't fit, or if they do wear them, they would have to get it either altered or get a custom shirt, which is just it's a pain, and it takes time and extra money. So I thought, hey, there might be a opportunity here. So yeah, there's more to the story, but yeah, we can kind of chip away at it. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's a cool backstory, and actually, truthfully, and it makes a lot of sense, and I didn't ever think about that, because you've heard this kind of thing, particularly about women's clothing. It's like, well, they don't make clothes that actually fit the actual female body, they or whatever. But I never really thought about this as it's applied to actually very fit men. And in my own case, actually, yeah, I've noticed that with some dress shirts, I mean, that I've put on where, you're right, the waist part, and I'm not like hugely V-shaped at all. My shoulders are broader than my waist.
Mm-hmm.
And I've noticed that, yeah, it kind of billows down at the bottom by the waist, and I'm like constantly adjusting it, like stuffing it down into my pants, trying to tighten it up, and it just kind of keeps coming undone.
Kind of bunch it up and you tuck it around to the back so where it's not puffed out and you're
exactly like that. And I even, to the point where I was even considering, they were making these things where you could put straps on or something underneath your pants, and they would hold the shirt down for you or something like that. I was kind of looking into something like that, because I just hated constantly adjusting this shirt.
Yeah.
I didn't want it kind of just, constantly pulling out and puffing at the bottom here. But yeah, I never made the connection that because the greater retail market does not really cater to guys who are fit and muscular at all. But you did make that connection here. I mean, when you started asking around, were you just asking around for your own reasons here, and it just kind of you had a light bulb moment?
Yeah, yeah. And part of the story is I started my company so I could have a shirt to fit me. You know, that was
Mm-hmm.
my first goal is I was just trying to figure out how to get a decent looking dress shirt. And you know, I kind of started my business plan inadvertently. I didn't set out to start a business plan. I was just going through, just Googling dress shirts for athletic men, and you know, I'd come up, your company would claim that they did this, so I just write it down, write the name of the company down, and I'd look at their website and ordered some stuff and was never really happy with anything. But as I was searching for a company that would make a shirt, I compiled this list of these websites, and turns out that I was coming up with a competitor analysis and part of my business plan, and I wasn't even setting out to do that. And but that's, you know, as I started getting into it, I did get some. Went to the Small Business Development Center here locally, and that's part of what they help you do is write a business plan. And I showed them what I had, and they said, "Yeah, that's the first step in writing a business plan, just coming up with all your competitors." So yeah, I was just trying to find a shirt. That's all I was doing.
So how about that for a story? Is like I was just looking for a shirt that would fit me, and
Yeah.
then I ended up just stumbling into a, a business plan.
Yeah.
Whereas most of us have to do the very opposite here. We have to intentionally look up how to do a business plan, but you kind of just did it intuitively or unconsciously.
Yeah.
So all right, so let's take it back a little bit, because at the start of the show, you were talking about how you actually got into your clothing company here. You worked a day job in finance, and then it was killing you spiritually,
Yeah.
and you called your wife and said, "I can't do this anymore. This is just killing me." And she thought you were just joking around, blowing off steam or whatever, but no, you were dead serious. You wanted to quit. And now you kind of hinted at it a little bit, that it's not a small deal to quit your job like that when you have so many mouths on the lines. You got a wife and you got 4 daughters. Is that correct?
Correct. Yep.
Okay, 4 daughters. A lot of people depending on you. So you really kind of go out on a limb here when you really just sacrifice that income like that
Yeah.
because you can't deal with it anymore. A lot of times people would say, "Man, are you crazy? All these people, all this stuff on the line here, and you just gonna walk out like that?" But honestly, that is a lot of what all of us out there who run businesses deal with here, or that is a lot of what we grapple with. It's like, this job I hate it, it sucks, and I know I'm worth more than this, but
Yeah.
this is risky, you know.
Yeah.
How Go
That's
ahead.
one of the things that you with the background and Taekwondo is you learn to be able to accept that you have to take risks and have the courage to move forward in the face of whatever could happen. You know, you don't take a risk just for just the bad things to happen. There's a goal at the end that you're willing to take that risk to get through that risk and approach that goal. So I've always had that sort of mindset, and when I knew that I couldn't work for someone else anymore, and I knew that there was bigger things that I wanted to do, that risk of walking out of my job, I accepted it. I knew what I was getting myself into, but I also knew what the upside could be, and that
Hmm.
my mindset then too was I just had to do it. You know, I was done just going through motions, going through life without having any sort of ownership in what I was doing. It was just pointless, really. So I knew I had to take that risk, and yeah, I knew I was other people were taking that risk with me, and I did everything I had to do to minimize the impact on them. There were some scary moments here and there, which that's going to happen, but for the most part, it worked out fairly well for what could have happened. But yeah, just that risk, um, not not being risk avoidant,
Right.
that I learned in Taekwondo has really helped me to make that decision.
I'm curious, how did your wife respond to this when she found out that you were actually serious about this? Because I do know from my own experience, I do know this kind of thing can put tremendous strain and
Yeah,
stress on a family. Because it's only natural. You can't blame them. It's like, well, wait a minute, we got mortgage, we got bills, we got kids we got to put through school, kids we got to feed, you got to keep them clothed. Now, you did say that you didn't just go from one extreme to another. You can go from having a job to having no job, and now just kind of staying at home, bumming around, figuring out your master plan going forward. You did continue on and bringing in money,
right.
you know, just, so it wasn't like you just were blowing up your whole life here and weren't conscious of the fact that you were just putting everyone's butt on the line.
Right,
You
right. Yeah,
you were
I had
cognizant of that.
I had I had skills of working with my hands, and I had some
Right.
experience just from helping other people and home repairs and light construction stuff. So I knew I could pretty much do that right away, and I knew some people that I could work with and kind of start a little gig on the side. Um, but yeah, my wife, when I called her and told her on the phone that I was quitting my job, there was a little bit of back and forth. She was like, "You can't do that," and I said, "Well, I have to." So on the drive home, I wasn't sure what to expect. I expected her to be upset and expected it to be not a very fun conversation when I got home. But to her credit, she as scared as she was, she had our daughters write a note to me saying basically, "We believe in you," and stuff like that. And I still have them in my office here.
Awesome.
Yeah, and so I was really proud of her for not completely freaking out and you know doing something drastic. So yeah, I was really happy with the way she reacted to that.
That's really awesome to hear too, because we know that family support is big when you take a step like that, and people who don't have it, it really makes it nearly impossible.
Yeah, I would say not just nearly. I would say impossible. If the family doesn't support you, or at least doesn't work against you, I guess it
Yeah.
would be a way to put it. If my wife was dead set against what I did and started putting up roadblocks and everything I tried to do, there's no way it would have worked. Absolutely not. So even though I called her and told her what I was going to do, and it wasn't really her decision on that part, she was still supportive, and yeah, we definitely made it work together. It's not something I could have done on my own with the way my life was.
So when Atlas Menswear was officially launched, it got off the ground. You had this business plan. You took a toll of all your competitors. You had a firm idea about what you were going to do, where you were going to go with it. When did things actually start to? It can be actually start to kind of come around, because you got to get a product. Number one, that's probably the hardest thing. You got to get the product in, and then you got to get it out there. You got to make sure people know about you, and then because even if you do great work, if no one knows who you are, it don't matter.
Right.
Um,
So
when did things actually start to take off?
yeah. So this kind of goes into one of the things that I have been talking a lot about is some of the lessons that I learned in Taekwondo and
Hmm.
how I've been able to apply those to the other areas of my life and mostly in business. So one of the things I learned in Taekwondo is how to work through adversity. Um, the the obvious way adversity presents itself in Taekwondo is if you're in a match and you get kicked in the face. That's immediate adversity. Your eyes start watering. You're dizzy and disoriented a little bit, and you're not thinking straight. You have to clear your head, but you're still there to win. You can't just walk off and take a break until you get your bearings again. You still have to keep moving forward. So that's kind of the lesson that I needed to apply to how I launched my company and what happened when I launched my company. So um, I worked with a fashion designer, and we got the design of the shirts, and I decided I wanted to launch my company at the Arnold Sports and Fitness Expo. I don't know if you're familiar with that, being in weightlifting, but the Arnold is it's a huge event in Columbus, Ohio, which is about 2 hours from my house. It's a bodybuilding competition, but it's so much more. They have everything from strongman competition to they have martial arts. They have uh, gymnastics and fencing. It's a huge sporting event, and they also have a huge vendor expo too. And I wanted to launch my company at the vendor expo at the Arnold. So I worked with my fashion designer. We got the design finalized, bought had manufacturing run, bought inventory for my business. I bought the booth space, which is not cheap at the Arnold. I bought I got hotel rooms and all the decorations for my booth. So I spent a lot of time and a lot of money to get ready for this launch. Um, Now this Arnold was March of 2020. Now, if you remember March of 2020, what the things that were going on, it
Mm-hmm.
was the first weekend in March of 2020.
Yep.
And so I had gone to Columbus. I had rented a vehicle to take all my boxes and everything, and it was actually 2 trips, so 2 hours each way. And I did that on Thursday and Friday was when the event kicked off. And I had a little pre-sale set up in the gym in Columbus, right close to the convention center. And the Thursday night before the expo kicks off, it's a huge event at that gym. All the famous bodybuilders are there. There's some movie stars, and it's just a big event. So I was able to get in with the gym and have a little pre-sale set up before the main expo took off, or before the main expo started. So the energy was real high in that gym, and I think it was about 8 o'clock in the evening, they announced that the whole expo had been canceled. And if there's any more direct correlation to getting kicked in the face or kicked in the stomach, that is a feeling that mimics
Yeah.
that getting hit so closely. And yeah, it took the wind out of me. And I felt kind of that feeling of, I just got kicked in the face, that I'm disoriented. What do I do now? Because I
Yeah.
was running on adrenaline. I was, everything was so exciting, and I was so pumped to launch my company at this event and present my company to all the people that were there. So then I remembered, when you get kicked in the face, you got to keep moving forward. You got to figure out a way to win. And so I kind of gathered my thoughts. I sat down on a bench and in that gym and tried to figure out what I could do now. So I knew everybody was still in Columbus. It was only a day before, so everybody, people travel from other countries to go to this
Mm-hmm.
event. So there was so many people in Columbus, and so I just decided, hey, I'm not gonna have a booth there, but I can walk around the convention center area. I can walk around in the convention center because people were still congregated in that area, and just start talking to people. You're just walking up, complete strangers, and just start talking to people and telling them what I do and showing them some pictures. And of course, I had one of my shirts on, and just the conversation just started flowing naturally because I wouldn't call myself a natural salesman. I'm a little bit on the introvert side when I'm talking to strangers, but I believe in what I do so much that I didn't feel for a second like I was selling. I was presenting my solution to this problem to all these people that had the same problem that I do, and that's how it felt. So yeah, I ended up meeting some professional bodybuilders. I got the IFBB Pro physique competitors that are wearing my stuff now, and they post stuff on their Instagram, and so I was able to turn a really negative situation into actually another positive by just grassroots going around and talking to people and making those connections.
That's awesome. It's awesome. So, okay, to kind of like piece everything together here. So you got, a very accomplished background in martial arts, nearly an Olympian. You got tremendous games gains as a weightlifter and as a businessman selling a line of clothing here. So one of the things that started going through my head now as we were having this conversation here is like, and I think this ties in back to your martial arts background here. I hear this a lot about the white belt mentality. It's like going from one thing to another, or learning, always being in a learning state, where nothing is so so complex that you can't figure it out if you just apply yourself to it enough. So that's a real continuity that I'm noticing in your story here as you've gone through different phases of your life: military, martial arts, weightlifting, business. Is always like being willing to adapt and be ready to face adversity. Would you agree with that?
Absolutely, yeah. And that's another lesson that I refer back to from martial arts, and even weightlifting too. It's perfect that you said the white belt mentality. When I was a white belt, I was 6 years old. It's hard for me to remember what exactly I was feeling, but just from teaching and being in Taekwondo, when you're a white belt, everything is new. Everything is awkward. You don't, when you first go into a martial arts school, you don't know the customs, you don't know the routine, you don't know how to tie your belt, you don't know anything. So it can be awkward and scary, and which is, anytime you start something new, that's the way it's going to be. But there's that progression that you go through. The second or third time you learn to tie your belt, and you get your uniform on right, and progress a little bit more. You start learning to kick, and you're able to get into the routines and the customs of the class, and you're not quite as awkward anymore. You're still got a lot to learn, but you're starting to get the feel of it. And that's, whenever I start something new, I refer back to that lesson in Taekwondo. When I started my company, I don't know, I can't even use a sewing machine. I don't know how to use a sewing machine, but I was able to figure out how to start a clothing company by bringing some people in to help. I mentioned I work with a fashion designer, but everything was new to me. I didn't know how to design a shirt. I didn't know how to build a website. I didn't know really much about online marketing. But I had that mentality and the knowledge that because I don't know anything now and everything's awkward, that's not how it's going to be weeks and months down the road. I'm going to get into this, and I'm going to learn, and I'm going to figure it out, and not being afraid to be uncomfortable, and you get in there and just start learning it.
Right. Exactly right. It's always a learning curve. You start something, but you got to start, and you won't adapt anything. And more to it, like a lot of what we're talking about are voluntary changes in your life that you have made. You also have to account for the things that are not so voluntary, because life is going to happen to you one way or another, and you're going to have to kind of learn your way around it. Like you said with the expo, the Arnold Expo. I remember that time. It was around March of that time where things were starting to get really bad with the COVID virus.
Yeah, actually, the Arnold was one of the first things that was canceled, because up until that point, I thought it was unconscionable for that event to be canceled, because nothing had been canceled yet. That was really the first weekend that things started shutting down, and then it was a mindset change for everybody.
Yeah, I do remember that, because that was around time the lockdown really started to happen. We had heard about COVID, a few months prior, I think starting around late 2019, when, this stuff was starting to hit the news, and then it just kind of snowballed from there. And yeah, you're right. Around March of 2020 is when things started to get real. It's when gyms started shutting down.
Yeah.
The lockdown started happening. The mask mandates started kicking in. And yeah, that was a pretty dark and weird time here. And so like the Arnold Expo shuts down, and you got kicked in the teeth here pretty bad. It's something you did not expect. And you did lick your wounds for a little bit, but then you got back up and you say, okay, what can I do now? And it sounds like in terms of personality, we're somewhat similar here. I'm kind of an introverted person myself here. I don't I don't mingle with strangers very easily. So just doing this podcast now is a big step for me. It's kind of really taking me out of my comfort zone, but it's worth it.
Yeah, it's
And
good.
I've been doing it for a while now. It's fun. I do like it. I do get kind of jittery every time I'm about to get on with someone because you don't really know who you're really getting on with. But anyways, I do know what that's like. To actually say, you know what, do it, get up there and do it. And you kind of quake a little bit, but you did do it. You responded to an adverse situation here with a novel approach. Whereas probably most of the people who were there who got shut down on, they probably like, all right, pack it up, let's get out of here.
Yeah.
Would you agree?
I did see people actually physically packing it up and leaving. They were most of the people were unloaded and had their stuff in the convention center, and yeah, that night I was around there and they were loading everything back up, and they were taking off and heading back to wherever they came from, and um, who knows whether some of those companies ended up folding or if they worked through it. But that's not something I was willing to do. I was already there. I had already committed, my time and a lot of my money too to launching that, and I was going to do something. There was no way I was going to come home empty-handed and without at least putting myself out there and making an effort and just doing whatever I had to do. And again, my family was real supportive of me too.
Sure.
One of the days, probably Saturday or something like that, one of my daughters was down there walking around with me, and she was wearing a T-shirt with my company logo on it, and just help with the brand awareness. So
Nice.
I had the support there too, and that was really really helpful. And it's funny that I like to tell the quick little story of when you're young. I think she was a couple years. She was probably 13 at the time, and dad's always kind of embarrassing when you're 13 years old. And so anytime I would go up to start talking to somebody about my company, she would just kind of keep walking and go off the other way and kind of look and just roll her eyes like, oh, dad's doing it again. It's so embarrassing. But we would kind of joke around about that, but she was still there to help, and she was as excited about it as I was.
Yeah, I have a 13-year-old daughter myself, so I do kind of identify with that. And she's pretty cool for the most part. But yeah, it's pretty easy to embarrass your kids. You just
Yeah.
got to be yourself.
Yep.
Really, it doesn't take any effort.
It's part
But
of your job as a dad. You have to embarrass your kids sometimes.
yeah, right. Exactly. That's what I tell them. So, all right. So, talking about the greater picture here. So, how do you? Let me see. How can I phrase this? Obviously, all of this impacts your family so much. We've already touched on that, and you want to talk about like things like how adversity, how taking on challenges, and being nimble and adaptive to life really kind of translates well into how you function as a father, or as a husband, or anything like that, and how it really kids really learn more of what they see rather than what you preach to them.
Yeah.
You know, they weren't there obviously for a lot of your Taekwondo career and your weightlifting beginnings and that kind of thing, but they do see, they have been there since the beginning of the business career,
Yep.
which you can argue is probably 5 times harder than any of that other stuff you've done because
Yeah.
weightlifting, like you said, weightlifting and Taekwondo, it's very individualized. You are part of a team, and you're a part of a team as well if you run a business and you've got cohorts with you. Um, but it's all very well. Let me go back a little bit. That's very weightlifting and Taekwondo is very individualized. Being a part of a business and starting a business is very team oriented. Even if you don't really have a business team, your team is your family if you've got one.
Right.
And you're either moving as one or it's not really moving at all. Because if you don't have a supportive family or you don't have a family that's at least willing to not drag you back if they're not being openly supportive, you're at net zero. You're not progressing, you're not regressing, you're just kind of treading water.
Yeah.
Um,
It's kind of
Yeah.
analogous to, again, another lesson I learned in Taekwondo. It's even though
Hmm.
that's an individual sport, when you're actually on the mat competing, you still have the people you train with. You have a coach. You have even the students. You can help you some when you're preparing for a big tournament or something like that. And it's the same with business. Um, even if I was the main one at that convention center that day, but I still had, my daughter was with me, my wife was down there. I still have, even though they weren't really in the foreground in the spotlight like I was trying to be, they were still my support structure. And um, without them, I wouldn't have been as effective as I was, because that's I drew energy from them, and I knew they were watching me. Like you said, when you teach your kids better by doing rather than just preaching to them. So my hope is that when my daughters get older and they have some challenging times in their lives, that they will look back and see what I did in that situation, and draw some lessons from that, and be able to move forward in similar way that I did. Because if I would have just tucked my tail and went and felt bad for myself back to the hotel room, but preached to them, you got to move forward no matter what. What I say to them is not going to resonate at all. They're going to remember that I was just
Hmm.
laying in bed feeling sorry for myself. So hopefully now, they'll remember me going to the convention center and moving forward, even though, they knew how bad of a situation it was. They knew how it affected me, but, the fact that I was still moved forward, I really want that to stick in their minds, and be able to pull from that when they need it.
Do you think you would have done that if they had not been there? If you didn't know that their eyes were on you, do you think you would have done that all the same?
No, I still would have done what I did, just because that's just, from my background. It's just who I am. I'm not really one to give up at all. Yeah, I still would have done the same thing. Maybe a little bit differently if they weren't there, but yeah, I still would have done that for sure.
Gotcha. So I want to ask you. So if you're somebody who doesn't have your background, military, taekwondo, business, or anything else, and say like you're starting on a fitness journey, like you want to get better, which is what so many people they at least claim that they want at the start of every year, and then as the by February we know that the numbers drop off significantly. Um, how would someone? We're talking a lot about just the actual power of grit here, being able to start something and commit to it. If they don't have these sports and athletic backgrounds that kind of teach you that stuff at a very early age, do you think there's a way that they can kind of, uh, I'll say hack for lack of a better word, they can kind of start to um, teach those skills to themselves here that they can actually benefit from whatever it is they're starting?
Certain percentage of people that just have more of a propensity to have that naturally. Some people are
Mhm.
just more focused and driven and clear about their goals than other people, and doesn't necessarily have to come from a athletics or competition background. But somebody that doesn't have that, if you're calling a hack of how to get that, I would say, just like working out, a hack would be to hire a coach or find a mentor. If that's one thing I did too. I started buying rental properties, and I didn't know what I was doing. The first rental property I bought, I had no idea what I was doing. I didn't have anybody around me that could help me. But after that, I started going to some real estate investor meetings, some local meetings, just local real estate investors meet up at a restaurant and just talk. And so I started going to those, and found a mentor that was willing to share information with me and help me. So that's a real good way to kind of shorten the learning curve, and you figure out what you need to be doing, and how to, that'll keep me motivated too. If you have somebody around you, or a group of people around you that are doing what you want to be doing, and they're motivated. They help keep you motivated too, not only by watching what they're doing and trying to emulate them, but good mentors will hold you accountable. And if you talk to a mentor and say, I'm going to look at 20 properties next week, and talk to them next week, and they'll ask you if you looked at 20 properties, you're going to want to be able to tell them, yeah, because this person is taking the time to be able to help you. You're not going to want to let them down. So those types of things are good ways to, if you don't have that natural propensity to stay motivated and you don't have the background, some things that you can do to kind of help you.
Do you think it's kind of worth more or more beneficial if you just start at whatever it is you're doing, rather than just kind of putting, a huge amount of research and emphasis, or research and analysis into something here? I mean, because you said you bought up a bunch of properties, rental properties. You didn't have a clue what you were doing. You just knew that you were buying these properties, and then you found yourself, I guess you found yourself saying, "All right, now what? I got this stuff. Now what?" And then from there, you kind of say, "Okay, I need someone to teach me what it is I'm actually doing." Do you recommend people start really doing that and just kind of like learning to fly as you fall, or would you kind of take a more measured approach and just kind of get a good feel for what you're doing is first, and then incrementally take it from there?
My natural state is to just jump into something knowing nothing and just start doing it. I'm not saying
Hmm.
that's the right way. Probably a little bit more analysis ahead of time would be prudent, compared to just jumping in. There's a good balance. I think especially something like a rental property. There's good properties and bad properties, and you need to. The best thing is to know if it's a good property or a bad property, financially speaking, before you buy it. So, but you can also get caught in that what they call analysis paralysis, which is
Right.
basically procrastinating by looking at the numbers and looking at them over and over and over, and you don't really, in the back of your mind, you're probably afraid to actually make that step, so you just stay in the analysis part, and you don't want to do that either. So, me personally, I lean more towards the just jumping into it and figuring it out, and sometimes you realize, oh, I shouldn't have jumped into that because it was a dumb idea, and I didn't know because I just jumped into it. So,
Mm.
but yeah, that sweet spot of doing the due diligence, doing the analysis, and then jumping into it when the time's right, um, is the best way, and that applies to everything, not just rental properties, but business, athletics. When I change a workout or something like that, if I've hit a plateau, um, me being the guy that just jumps into it, I'll go into the gym. I might make up a workout on my app on my phone, and I'll change it that morning, and then I'll just go to the gym and start doing that. Some people will research different workouts for weeks or different rep ranges, and different different philosophies, and it can take them forever to change, jumping into a new workout. But yeah, you gotta hit that balance of the right amount of analysis, figuring out when you're done with the analysis, and then going to it without any more delays.
You also just have to start being good at learning what is not working, and being honest with yourself that it's not working, and then changing gears, and be
Yeah,
willing to change gears. Again, going back to the rule of being adaptable.
yeah, and the more you do something, the quicker you're able to realize when something's not working, because you start to learn how to analyze your numbers when you're in your business. You look at a profit and loss, or different trends in your business, and you're able to spot those things quicker the more you do it. When you first start, again, it's that white belt mentality. You don't even know if you're doing the wrong things because you don't know what to look for to see if
Hmm.
it is right or wrong. You just keep going, and you realize something's holding me down. Something's causing pain here. I got to figure out what it is, and then you start diving into the metrics. Or if you're working out, you start looking at your form, or something like that, and seeing what you're doing wrong, and or asking somebody else to watch you. If you have a coach or even a workout buddy, you say, hey, can you watch my form here and see what I'm doing wrong, and they'll tell you. Or in a business, you can find a mentor and say, hey, I can't figure out what I'm doing wrong here. Why am I bleeding money in this certain area? And they can look at it and help you. So yeah, all sorts of things you can do.
So you're all right. You're a pretty accomplished guy here. The Atlas Menswear is. I assume it's going
It's
well.
going well. Yeah,
You
it's still
know.
not where I envision it to be, but I'm on the right trajectory. It's again, success is measured in years. There's no overnight
Hmm.
success in anything. So just with that mentality that I have in the gym of just a slow incremental change and just grinding it out day after day, not expecting to any one workout to have show a big
Hmm.
jump, but it's just that long steady increase.
So we have a long list of successes here. Now, if we could just briefly, because I want to give people a full picture here, if we could just briefly, what are some things that you misstepped on? Some things that didn't that you that just kind of misfired here. It can be applied to anything: Taekwondo, weightlifting, business.
Yeah.
Because people being what they are, they run into those things. Obviously, it's going to happen. It's part of life. And what we're trying to tell people here is that can't define you. He's like, you're gonna fall on your face. You will fail. I mean, I saw years ago. I saw a YouTube video of Denzel Washington giving a commencement speech at a college, and it was pretty awesome because he told literally these kids at graduation ceremony, he's like, you are going to fail at some point in your life. Embrace it.
Yeah.
It's going to happen. I know that's a weird thing to hear at a graduation ceremony because it's all pomp and flair, and it's like the world's in front of you. Here comes life. It's so exciting, and it is exciting, but you know you're going to take it in the face probably more than a few times out there, and you just need to know that because no one told me that, and that's what I experienced. But I I kept grinding, and here I am, and you're going to have to face the same. So I figure it better to tell you now, and then you find out on your own. You are going to get knocked around out there, and so take your failures in strides.
Yeah.
So yeah, you don't have to get too much into it, but I do I'm curious to hear like what are some things that or what are some experiences you had that you said, ugh, well, that was kind of a hot mess.
Yeah, and just kind of piggyback on what you were saying. If you don't fail, if you don't experience failure, then you're not really trying to accomplish anything. You're staying in your comfort zone, which is where no learning or development takes place. So
Hmm.
you have to expect to fail if you're trying to accomplish something big. If you're trying to grow personally or physically, you're going to hit failure. So the failure is actually a good thing that lets you know that you're out of your comfort zone. You're trying something new. You're advancing your knowledge. So fail. I have a mentor that says fail faster. I've heard a few
Yeah,
people say it.
yeah.
There's a certain number of failures you're going to go through before you hit your goal. We just don't know what that number is. But if I could tell you, you're going to fail 20 times before you hit this goal, and no matter what, this is the number of failures you're gonna do. Are you going to timidly go through all those failures, or are you going to fail as fast as you can and get through those and get to your goal? You're gonna jump into them and run through them as fast as you can. So yeah, failures it's a necessary part of success. Some failures that I would say, well, with my rental properties, after COVID hit, the government said you couldn't evict anybody for non-payment of rent. I wasn't expecting that, and I didn't have a ton of rental property as I wasn't Donald Trump or anything, but I was still managing all of them on my own. At the time, I had 16 units, and for whatever reason, a lot of my tenants decided not to pay because they knew I couldn't do anything about it at the time anyway. So I did end up I ended up selling some of my rental properties. I didn't forcefully lose any of them because I bought a lot of them off of local real estate investors, and it was just making payments directly to those people rather than to a bank. So I didn't want to. I had to face these people face to face that I was making payments to. So I said, I'll sell them. I don't want a situation where I'm coming to you saying I need another month before I can make my mortgage payment to you because my tenants aren't paying. So that's something that when you first look at it, I could say that wasn't my fault. That was, government came in and said, you can't evict anybody. and I could just say, it's just something that happened to me. But one of the things that I like to preach, and something that I learned in Taekwondo, is everything is your fault. Everything comes down to being your fault. Even if it seems like it's not, it has to be, because if it's not my fault, then there's nothing I can do to fix it. When I'm helping somebody, or talking to somebody, whether it be business or fitness, people don't like to hear it, but I'm going to tell you, yeah, it's your fault. If you're overweight, it's your fault. If your business is failing, it's your fault. But that's not me blaming or coming down hard on someone. That's me saying you have the power to fix it. I'm empowering you by saying what caused this bad thing to happen is you. That means you can fix it. If it's somebody else's fault, you have to rely on that person, someone else, to fix it. But you have to empower yourself by taking ownership of it and saying, this is my fault. I could have had a different management structure set up. I could have had a management company managing my rental properties. There's a lot of things I could have done, even for something that I didn't foresee coming with the COVID stuff. There's some things that I could have done to prepare myself for unexpected things, and I failed to do those things. I have that knowledge now. I know what I failed to do, and so I was able to learn from that failure. And that's one of the things that you really have to do, is if you experience a failure, you have to learn from it. There's always a lesson there. Um, if you don't learn from a failure, then it's just a failure. You didn't gain anything from it. So you have to be able to learn from your failures, and that's what makes you a better person. That's what makes you more knowledgeable. That's what makes you stronger. That's what makes you more set up to deal with failures in the future, because you have that knowledge that you gained from your past failures and successes, and you're able to put all those things together and keep moving forward.
I think that's a brilliant way you spun that interpretation of failure, or interpretation of what many people can perceive as blame. Like if something ain't going wrong, and this is what they do teach, and what they should be teaching in leadership roles, when you have people under you, because this is what's going to happen anyway. When something goes wrong and it's on your watch, even if you weren't directly involved and you had no knowledge of it, well, you're in charge. So somebody's going to get blamed for it, and it's going to get you, and it's going to be you.
Yeah.
But we're kind of going into the Jocko Willink extreme ownership area here.
Yeah.
But I think that the way you kind of turn the definition of failure around as not being a blame game, but more of like, this is within your power to alter and to turn around. So if you just say, well, it's not my fault, I couldn't control XYZ, then you are just forfeiting power over to something or someone else. But if you own it, you really own it, and say, well, then I can make this good again. And I think that's probably the key insight is right there, is that you can turn it around if you just claim it. And you don't want to claim something that's negative and ugly, that doesn't look good or doesn't feel good. But if you do, it's yours to do with as you want.
And that's a lesson in teaching and leadership that I kind of learned a difficult way, because to me, I respond to stuff like that. I respond to more of the boot camp style coaching and teaching, and I can take that, and that gets me moving. I don't do that hard to everybody that I'm teaching, or even people that are coming to me for advice. But I do. To me, in my mind, when someone comes to me and says that it's overweight or out of shape, and they're complaining about it, I'll tell them it's their fault, but not. I don't mean to offend people, but people get offended by that. And when the first few times, or whenever, that people would get mad and say, I can't believe you said that. And I'm like, what? That's I'm empowering you. It's your fault. So we can fix this now. It's not your friend's fault. You're not whoever, whatever else's fault it is. It's your fault. So we can work on it. That's a good thing, right? It took me a little while to put myself in other people's shoes and realize how that sounds to them. So you sometimes, depending on who I'm dealing with, I do try to soften that up a little bit now from what I did before. But it's still a challenge for me, because it just sounds so right in my head but I don't realize that it doesn't, and from other people.
No, no. That is something you got to kind of learn too. You got to kind of learning how to be tactful is a skill.
Yeah.
You do learn that how a message is delivered is as important as the message itself. And you're right. The way things play out in your head, a lot of times, once it escapes your mouth, doesn't really play out the same way. And sometimes within seconds of saying it, he's like, "Oh God."
Yeah.
But
or when you see the look on their face, you're like, oh, what did I
right.
just say? Oh yeah, that doesn't sound the same to them as it does to me.
Right, yeah, you just kind of notice how they just kind of shut down or switch off. If they don't get outright angry, it's kind of like they kind of start clamming up, and
Yep.
you can see that on their face. But that again is another skill set that you have to kind of learn just by by stumbling over your own feet. But I do like that recontextualization of failure, because you're right. No matter what you do, everything is a everything is a constant progressive line that goes up and down, up and down, up and down, up and down, and embracing the fact that you're not going to get everything right all the time. Even if it goes up and down, up and up and down, it's still going to chart up, down, up, down, up,
Right.
down, up, down. It's going up. If you look at any a lot of or any like statistical chart or a lot of statistical charts. I won't say any, but if you look at a line of progression, that's what you're really looking at. You're not looking at a straight line. You're looking at up, down, up, down, up, down as it increases
Right.
continuously, even with the dips, even with the ebbs and flows.
It's like the stock market. As many ups and downs and crashes we've had. If you go back 50 years and look at the 50 years, it's still with all the smaller ups and downs, it's still a steady increase.
Right, exactly. Even with all the depressions, all the recessions, the stock market has continued to grow in value.
Yeah.
Continuously, if you just look at the totality of things. But so all right, so we've been on here for a while here. All right,
I've kind of lost track of time. I'm enjoying this.
Oh, good. Yeah. I always monitor time. I have to, because I have people that are busy and they gotta be other places and they have scheduled time for me. So I'm always looking at the clock. It's not that I don't care. I don't know if it's obvious or not. It's not that I don't care. Not that I'm not listening. It's just that I know I gotta be respectful of a lot of people's time here, because a lot of people got places to be and things to do.
Sure.
But we've been on here for a little over an hour and 20 minutes now.
Wow.
And yeah, right. And we have a closing tradition as we start to wrap things up. We have a closing tradition on this podcast where the guest has the final word. So, when you've been on this long, a lot gets talked about, and I think we've kind of done a pretty good job of constantly reiterating a central theme here, if there is one. I picked up on one, but I like to kind of narrow things down here for folks in a very succinct sort of way. So if there was nothing else that they remembered from this interview that they were listening to, they could walk away with one thing in mind. And it can be anything, one paragraph, one word, that you would like them to remember above all else. What would you say it would be?
Figure out what you want to do and don't be afraid to jump into it and start doing it, because that's, to me personally, that's the best way to learn. The best way. I mean, if you start moving, you get inertia, and not just physical inertia, but the mental inertia that you need to keep progressing towards your goals. And those successes and failures are going to happen. Just keep moving forward and learning, and you'll eventually get there.
Physics 101: an object in motion stays in motion.
Absolutely. Yep. That's why they, in football, they say running back, even if you run into a 300-pound lineman, keep those feet moving. That's all you do. You don't stop. Those feet got to keep moving.
Yeah, I remember when I played football, and I wasn't a running back, but when you see those big guys bearing down, your first reaction is fear.
Run the other way.
And run the other way, yeah, because this is gonna hurt. But yeah, just barreling through it, and I think that's a good place to end it. Aaron Woolf, thank you so much for your time, man.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate it. I had a great time.
Yeah, I had a great time too. And everyone listening, of course, I'll put Aaron's contact information, his social media in the show notes. I'll put the company website on there. It's really cool stuff here. It's very specifically made products. They are very open about the fact that they don't cater to the average person, the average man in the public. Um, and that's fine because as we know, there's plenty of people out there who do.
We
But
like to
if you
say
are
if you're not uh, far enough along in your fitness journey to fit in an Atlas Menswear shirt, we will stand behind you and cheer you on until you get there and be able to wear our shirts like the other elite men are already doing.
right, right, and I actually, as you mentioned that, I did remember reading that too, and I thought that was really cool too. So instead of making this sound like some sort of exclusive club that you're not going to get into because you ain't good enough, you make it you make it very inclusive sounding, and I think that's great. That's important because people don't need to feel excluded.
Right.
They need to feel supported,
Yeah,
and
I
you
want
make
every man out there to be able to wear our stuff. We're just not going to lower the bar to
right.
get more customers. We want to help our customers raise their bar to be able to fit into our stuff. That's what we stand for.
Exactly right. And that's such an awesome thing. And again, the website will be up on there. Um, if you have a need for it or you're going to have a future need for it, take a look around. It's pretty neat stuff there. And Aaron, once again, I want to thank you for your time here. I know we've run a little bit longer than we said we would, but it's been a great conversation. And it's always is a great conversation when it goes this long because I never anticipated going nearly 90 minutes. But it's always a good conversation. I enjoy talking to you. And those of you at home, again, this is Aaron Woolf, martial artist, teacher, weightlifter, husband and father, and owner of the Atlas Menswear. My name is Sean. This is the Fitness Reborn podcast. I'll see y'all on the other side. Until then, move forever. Peace out.